What I've got open now is a potential candidate for creating some foliage out of some kind of array of objects, what we call a atlas. Now, before we move too far along, we want to make sure that our image is a square and that it's the proper resolution, our 4K 4096 by 4096. I'll go up to image, image size, and confirm that fact. It is a 4096, 4096. So it's a square, it's the right resolution. Now we can continue. Now this is a scan taken from some Quixel mega scans, but this could be somewhat similar to what you have gotten on your flatbed scans with the objects you've laid out on the scanner glass in an array or a grid of some kind. We need to prepare this a little bit more because when we use this in our 3D model, we want to make sure that the background becomes totally black because we're also going to use this as a alpha mask to keep the subjects we want and kind of block off all of that tight detail we want to avoid having to model by hand. So Photoshop can do a lot of that for us. What we're going to do is similar to how we worked with our height map masking it, we're going to go to select, subject. We're going to hope Photoshop finds all of the kind of nooks and crannies that we want it to. Now, as we remember, if we went ahead and masked this, if we filled this with a solid color, we're trying to fill this with black, it's going to block out our subject. So I'm going to cancel, and this time I'm going to go to select, inverse, and now we see some of the marching ants are now around the contour, the outside of this area as well. So we're really selecting the areas in between the subject and the border. So now let's try a layer, new fill layer, solid color, and let's make this 100% black, making sure we're got all zeros and RGB. That's really the quickest way to tell, I think. And let's click OK. So this has pretty much prepared our color layer, but I'm not totally sure I'm satisfied with this. If we look at the before and after, it's quite hard to tell, but some areas are not fully blacked out. So let's actually temporarily switch this back to another color other than black, and we can really see where maybe Photoshop has missed some of our contours. It looks pretty good in most regions, but I can see here there's a little bit that's missing and a little bit that's missing, and here too. So we will need to come back and adjust our layer mask. Let's look at just the layer mask real quick. So remember, we're painting white anywhere we want to add the color layer here. Okay, that's our red in this case, in this moment. And black will block that red away, letting through our subject, the areas we want to keep. So we want to improve this mask. We're going to need to do a little bit of manual painting. So I'm going to go back here, and we've already fixed it. Okay, so we're back to our regular view mode. So I'm going to keep this bright red on because it's going to help me visualize. Now, there's a few tools we can use. I'm going to just use the paintbrush for now, and we're going to start with just a regular brush. And remember, our settings can be found if we right-click somewhere in the workspace. And we can change this size, change our hardness. And we're only going to be painting with two colors. We're not going to be painting with red or the subject color. We're just going to be painting with black and white, because if you see over here, I don't want my layers selected. I want my layer mask selected. So I want to make sure that is highlighted. I'm going to go over to my brush, make sure that I have white or black only in my palette. I can switch between the two easily. This is your foreground and background color. That's what Photoshop likes to distinguish these as. And if you are concerned you don't have a perfect white or perfect black, if you click this little box here, it's going to reset those to white and black. To switch in between, you can hit X on the keyboard, and you can see down here I've got some shortcuts. Whatever keystrokes I make will show up. So if I switch, I hit X, we've got black. If I hit X, we've got white. So remember, white is going to let through the red, and black is going to block it in this case. So I'm going to zoom in here. I'm going to get really, really close. I'm going to come back, and I'm going to adjust my brush size. You can use the sliders by right-clicking, but I'm also going to show you one more shortcut. We've talked about X used to switch between your foreground and background, but I'm also going to play with the brackets on the keyboard. Now these brackets are near your return or enter key. just above and to the left on most US keyboards. You can see brackets to the left make it a smaller brush. Brackets to the right make it a bigger brush. So I'm going to come through here and I'm just going to keep painting. If we want to zoom in even more, looking at really just like pixels now. So that's playing with the paintbrush a little bit. Let's see if we can add some other tools. Let's come in here, this skull shape. Let's let some of these hotkeys clear out of the way. And I'm going to come over here to the quick selection tool. I'm clicking and holding on this to open it up. You could try the magic wand, but I'm going to try the quick selection tool and come in here. And by holding down Shift on the keyboard, I'm going to increase this auto selection area. If we go over, just like, you know, we might go over with the paintbrush. Now I've selected way too much. It's defaulting to minus here. If you don't see a minus, it's a subtle little minus there. You can select up here. So we don't want to mask out the skull itself. So let's remind Photoshop of kind of what the subject is here. Okay, we can also increase the brush size of this, same way with brackets. Okay, and you can get a little too aggressive with it and it will start to kind of undo the work you've done. So I'm going to come back, smaller brush. Okay, we've really kind of eroded the area we wanted. Let's make this smaller and trace through. Okay, what I like about the quick selection tool is Photoshop will start to look for some contrasty edges. But let's say that's okay. Let's also grab this area. I'm holding down Shift again to add to my quick selection. Let's see if there's any other regions on the skull above. Holding down Shift. Oh yeah, we've got some areas here that weren't quite masked. And we want things to be fully black in our final alpha mask. Okay, Photoshop did a good job about kind of coming back in there after it was expanded. It's snapped back to the proper contours. You know, I think that's actually just part of the skull. Okay, so we've got these selections with these marching ants we see. Now, how do we actually turn those into paint? Well, you could do it a couple ways. You could then paint on here. Let's get a big brush and I'll show you. Zoom in once more. With a white brush, we could just paint. And you can see as I'm dragging the paintbrush around, nothing else is getting painted but those regions. If I was to switch back to black. Okay. We can also go to Edit, Fill, and select white. And that will also let that pass through. So now I'm going to deselect and go to select, deselect, not deselect layers, deselect. And you can see that worked okay. You know, I think we've got a little bit of edge to clean up now, but you can see that's a quick way to maybe rough out some bigger regions. I want to make sure I have my mask selected when I go back and paint. And let's just kind of break off the little skin left behind, if you will. And in here, maybe just a quick swipe through. Okay. Now, you could argue maybe we could have just done that with the brush to begin with, but I wanted to show you another way to do some quick selections. So with that done, like we've got a lot of detail now with our contours. We're not just kind of taking what Photoshop gives us. We've really taken charge of it. So we're going to make this black again. Okay. And after we've done all this hard work, let's go ahead and save this as a TIFF. I'm going to go to File, Save As. And away from raw scans, I'm going to go to Textures. atlases. I've went ahead and made a folder for TIFFs and something specific for this texture. And I'm going to overwrite this one. I've already done this once, but I'm going to go ahead and save this as a TIFF if you haven't saved it yet. You'll still get this dialog box. And remember, we want to save it as a TIFF to preserve these layers, this layer mask that we made and this fill layer. So we'll hit OK. We're not done yet. We need to also create a situation where we just have white here and also have the black background. And then when we have that done, we can also save this as a PNG. I just wanted to go ahead and save it as a TIFF since we have all of our work done. We don't want to lose it in case something happens. So above the background layer, I'm going to make a new layer, new layer, fill layer, solid color, and it's going to be pure white. We want to make sure this is 100% here at the B, or these numbers 255, 255, 255. We'll click OK. So I'm going to save this again. I'm just going to go to File, Save. Okay, we can see all that nice detail is really showing through now. Let's go to Layer, Flatten. So now I'm going to go to File, Save As, navigate to my atlases folder, and I've made a folder for this specific atlas. I'm calling it Cans Bones Textures. And I'm going to open that up, and we're going to save this now as a PNG, and I'm going to call this Cans Bones Masked. Let's go ahead and call it Cans Bones Alpha. Alpha meaning our opacity mask. And we've got PNG selected. I'm going to save. Large file size is okay. If you're having hard drive space issues, you could drop it down, but we want to keep things as big as they can be right now. Click OK there. And now we're going to, if you don't have your history palette open, make sure you do. If you go to Window, History, do that again. Okay, if it doesn't show up over here on the right, it might be floating out in space. I'm going to go ahead and pull it over and dock it in here. Keep it nice and organized. Scroll down, and where it says flatten layer, that's the current history state we're at. I want to go up a level, and now we've got our layers back before we flattened it. So I'm going to go to layer, I'm going to adjust this rather, so we turn off that white fill layer. Let's move this up so we can see all of our layers. So I'm going to turn off that white fill layer and go to Layer, Flatten Image. We can discard those hidden layers. It's okay. Remember, we're not saving this. We're not overwriting our TIFF. We're saving this as a PNG just for our color information. Now we're going to go to File, Save As. And instead of Cans Bones Alpha, we're going to call this Cans Bones Diffuse, meaning our color information. And I'm going to save. Again, large file is great. Okay. I'm going to go back here and just make sure we do have this saved as a TIFF. Just make double sure. In our TIFFs folder. And it's not a PSD, we want it to be a TIFF. They both do contain layers, but a TIFF is going to be more portable if you decide you want to open this up in another kind of image editing software later and don't have Photoshop. We're going to save that, and that's fine. So there is a way to mask and prepare our atlas textures. We will now take our color information, this part that we just saved, the diffuse layer, and we're going to bring that into Quixel Mixer and create normal maps and roughness maps, that cool stuff.